I will go off as well. And Ava, you're ready to take the reins.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special practice forum sponsored by our Coalition for Career Development Center and the Wheelock College's Center for Future Readiness at Boston University. Today, we are talking about around early childhood career development strategies. Our panel today includes Lund, who is the Senior Director for Content and Curriculum at PBS KIDS, Dave Peth, who is Mighty Picnic founder and Emmy Award producer and creator for Lyla in the Loops, and Kristen McSwain, who directs the City of Boston's Office of Early Childhood. We are very fortunate also to be joined by Boston University Professor Kimberly Howard, who will reflect on how efforts such as those launched by PBS KIDS are so important. First, let's play a short 3-minute video from the new PBS KIDS series, What You Can Become.
Just one moment.
It's too hot to have a coat out here. Look, it's sunny outside. So I drew the sun. You want to help?
Yes.
I wonder what the weather's going to be like tomorrow.
What can you become?
Hi, Karis. I'm Jasmine.
Hi!
You're making great observations about the weather. That's using your senses to notice the world around you. Well, I can also help you know what weather's coming.
You can?
That's right. I'm what's called a meteorologist. I use tools on my computer to help me report what the weather will be every day. Then I share that information with grown-ups and kids just like you.
I like to tell people about the weather because I want to warn them if it's rainy outside.
Do you know where all of that information comes from? A meteorologist like me.
It does?
Yes. This is radar. It shows me where rain and storms are located. When I see green, I know that rain is coming. I also have another map, and this shows me temperatures across the entire country. I then use this information for a weather report to help people just like you plan the day.
Can you show me how you do a weather report?
Yes. 78 as we head into Tuesday, then our temperatures return to the 80s and warm up as we head into the rest of the week. I don't just figure out what the weather will be today. I also use science to help me figure out what the weather will be tomorrow and the next day.
I think you help people by telling them about the weather.
That's exactly what I do. Here, you try. Take the temperature and other information about sun and clouds and present it to your audience at your weather board.
The weather today is sunny with some clouds. Do not bring a coat, but make sure you bring a water bottle.
That's great. You've taken your observations and told your friends what the weather will be today. That's amazing.
It feels really good to help. I think it would be fun to do what you do.
If you are curious and like to explore the outdoors, there are a lot of jobs you can do that help protect people and the environment. You could be a meteorologist like me, or an oceanographer who studies and helps protect oceans, or a forest ranger who teaches people and takes care of the forest. Imagine the possibilities.
What can you become?
Oh, wonderful. I'm Professor Howard. As a leading researcher on children's conceptions of careers, can you share your impressions regarding the benefit of shows like What Can You Become?
Great. Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm very excited to be here today. And I just really enjoyed this video so much and have a few things that I wanted to reflect on in relation to that. So the first thing is that this is an opportunity for career exposure. It is so critical to give our young people opportunities to learn more about the world of work. They are looking around at the work that they're seeing adults doing and the occupations that they see them carrying out, and they're curious about those and wanting to understand. They're in the absence of opportunities to get information about them, they're kind of making that information up themselves. So having videos like this, having shows like this, then give them that opportunity for some, wider career exposure. The second thing that I really appreciated about this video was how it connects natural interests and curiosities then with future occupations. So it's showing kids the linkages between what they are interested in now and then what that might look like later on in life in the world of work. The third thing that struck me was their brief, developmentally appropriate descriptions of the work that's being done in the occupation, and in this case, meteorologist, was offered in a way that kids the age of the young girl in the video and others who would be watching it would be able to understand that and then appreciate what that occupation does. And then it also articulated how in that occupation, somebody working in that occupation helps other people. So what the contribution is of that work, that occupation. A fourth thing that really struck me was the role models. So it's, I'm always excited to see role models who reflect a range of different personal and social identities. We know that, in this case, the meteorologist was a woman of color. And what we know about role modeling is that they're most powerful in helping then develop kids' sense of confidence in themselves when they can connect with that role model around an important personal or social identity they have. And so that was a really excellent thing that I saw in this video. And then I think my favorite part of this video, or one of my favorite parts, and the last point that I wanted to make was that I also appreciated how towards the end, it was then broadening out beyond meteorologist. And so it was showing that interests that align with being a meteorologist are also aligned with other occupations as well. And so this not only conveys the possibilities, but also that career paths aren't narrow and that they can branch in so many different ways. And I think that this is an important conceptualization for us to be giving to kids early on. So those are just some of the thoughts I had, and I really appreciated being able to share those with you.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Howard. So as we begin our discussion, I'd first like to introduce the co-host of our panel today, Chi Kim. So Chi is a member of our Coalition for Career Development Center Executive Board and a former superintendent, principal, and educator. And she's now the CEO of Pure Edge Foundation. Chi, from your experience, your landscape 50,000 level foot view, why is it so important to expose young children to learning about the world of work at such an early age? Is that not too soon?
I think we're not actually having them commit to a career path. I think it's just getting exposure, right, to lots of different types of work. And I think the nice thing is, even when we were growing up, I think the questions we no longer ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think those days are over. It's actually really about just exposing lots of different kinds of opportunities for children to explore. And I think the real piece is just to make, I think the idea is curiosity, building curiosity at a very young age. That's when they want to, dig for dinosaur bones, all those kinds of things, where paleontology is like the hottest thing, at ages 4 and 5. And then you realize, oh, wait, this might not be such an easy path to follow. But I really think it's about curiosity and just opening up sort of the aperture of what's possible in the world.
I love it. Chi, do you want to begin our panel discussion with the first question to Anne?
Actually, I'm having a little bit of a tech glitch. Do you mind, Ava,
Yeah.
to do that first? Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Anne, I'm going to start with you from the PBS Kids perspective. Obviously, the show is really impressive and yet only one of many additions to programs targeting young children that you oversee. Can you tell us what motivated you all to design career development into your programs?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So our PBS Kids content has really always included characters working in their communities and showcasing different jobs and professions. But some of our newer content, like What Can You Become, that you just saw, and we also made an original podcast series called Jamming on the Job. These were approached in a more intentional way and were motivated by work that we're doing funded through a Ready to Learn grant from the U.S. Department of Education. And with funding from that grant, we've been able to work with expert advisors like Scott Solberg, who's here with us, and Ellen Galinsky and others to learn more about what early childhood career development really means and how our media content can support it. And our advisors helped us create a guiding approaches document that we use for what we call World of Work, Knowledge and Skills. And that helps our content producers think about how they can create stories and games and activities that do all the things that Dr. Howard mentioned earlier. So expanding kids' awareness of the variety of careers and job opportunities in the world of work, encouraging them to think about their own interests and talents and that are connected with different occupations, showcasing the range of technical and executive function and social and emotional skills that are valued in the world of work. And of course, we want our producers to think about how to reflect the diversity of the children in our audience by ensuring a balance of positive representation and affirming role models so that all children see themselves and possibly in these careers or jobs, and especially children of color and youth with disabilities. And so just a note, like, in addition to the content that has World of Work at the core curriculum, like What Can You Become and Jamming on the Job, we also have looked for opportunities where the same concepts and skills can be applied alongside a different curriculum or related curriculum. Though to note, technical skills, right, are part of something we want to build also for our kids. And so any of our curriculum areas like science or math or computational thinking, which you'll hear about in a little bit, are sort of all working side by side with that. And again, a series like Lyla in the Loop, which we'll hear Dave tell us about in a little bit, there are, just great characters and a great world and community to represent a variety of jobs and the people in them.
I love to hear this. Some of the skills that you mentioned that are being developed in early childhood that need to be cultivated more are some of the skills that we're hearing from our workforce partners, our employers, that they're looking to see the people they hire have more interest and curiosity in the work so they can take more initiative. They have a heavy focus on durable skills. And a lot of time they're talking about executive functioning development. So you're really thinking about this at the very, very beginning of the process, as early as 3, 4, 5 years old. So I'm wondering, when you all began this, did you all have this kind of vision for the kind of reaction that you're getting now? What has the reception's been like? Has it met your expectations, exceeded it? Were there any surprises?
Well, we're really actually very pleased with how with the content that's been produced to support this, curriculum and focus. And we do know it's reaching lots of kids across the country in a lot of different ways. I can share that What Can You Become has had 30 million streams across our digital platforms in its first year. And our podcast, Jamming on the Job, has had over 17 million streams in its first 7 months. So, and that's, of course, more, audio. But we also know that our PBS member stations across the country are working closely with our local community partners, and they're engaging families and educators in connecting PBS Kids content like these programs to everyday learning and experiences through local community events. So we're able to reach even more kids and families that way through that network. And so, for example, our early learning engagement team has developed 2 collections of educator and family resources around what can you become and jamming on the job, with a pair of community engagement workshops for stations to engage with their learning neighborhoods. So there's the, connection through the content directly that kids might have on our platforms, but there's also this extended reach that we're able to do. And we've just had such a great reception to all of those different ways that we've been able to put this content in front of kids and families.
I love that you have not just put this in front of parents and young people, but also in front of educators and communities, so that everyone who surrounds the children can be encouraging them in these directions. And I'm sure they're learning a lot. And so I'm wondering, I'm going to point this question to you, Dave. Can you tell us a little bit more about the elements of Lyla in the Loop? What are some of the key developmental pieces of the show, and how does it incorporate career development in ways that educators and communities can understand it?
Sure,
What are the
yeah.
key yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, Live in the Loop features Lyla and her big family, Loop's family. She has 3 siblings. And they run a family restaurant in the middle of a bustling city, diverse community neighborhood, with the help of a little fantastical creature named Stu, who is sort of a stand-in for a computer, and the way that he literally interprets Lyla's instructions. So in the setup, Lyla wants to help others in her community solve everyday problems, help her siblings get ready for school in the morning, herself included, more quickly, help her parents make up a new sandwich for Loop's lunch, and just play, make up a song, make up a dance. And the main developmental ideas in here are sort of at the center in the Venn diagram of computational thinking skills, all those sort of foundational skills that go into learning how to code, but across STEM career fields in the future, executive function, and the social emotional skills that support you being able to do any kind of problem solving or work with others, and then connecting that to future career pathways. And the chat, I'm going to put a Venn diagram actually that we use often to sort of conceptualize that, just sort of visualizes what I just said. And beyond that, the connection we're trying to make in the show is that those foundational computational thinking skills, exec function skills, like you're mentioning earlier, are what is going to be needed, not just in STEM careers in the future, but really in any career that involves problem solving of any kind. Like I said, the Loops run own and operate their own restaurant, a diner. And that requires a ton of exec function and sort of CT skills. Even if people want to think it's not a high-tech career, it's not the kind of thing we need these skills for, you absolutely do. Anyone that's worked in food service or retail knows it's not an easy job, and you need a ton of problem solving just to make it a profitable business. So that's the connection we're making. We do it again and again throughout the series, showing people in different career paths, and really also just showing how joyful and fun it can be to sort of develop those skills, build those muscles of CT and exec function, so that when it comes time for careers in the future, you can not only envision yourself in those careers, but that you've done that work. You've internalized and developed the skills that you need to be successful from the beginning.
That is great. And have you had the same kind of massive reaction to Lyla in the Loop?
Yes. I mean, it came out in February of this year. And yeah, leave it to Anne if she wants to quote any of the PBS stats. So we had a really tremendous interest in the series, a lot of streams, and anecdotally, parents and kids are really responding to it because it feels familiar. The family, the Loops feel like people they can connect with, and maybe it looks like their family or someone they know. And it's because it's relatable on purpose, the storylines we tell. And so it doesn't seem so intimidating then to prepare for future careers or like, develop these CT skills early on. All those things feel like stuff you might do later, but when you see it, embedded in a family, you can see that, okay, this matters right now, actually, and I get it. It connects to my life as I live it in the moment.
Love it. Love it. Chi, I know you're really eager to ask some questions yourself. How's your technology cooperating with you today?
It's great. I've got my phone set up. Everything's great. So thank you. Thanks for that, Dave. And Kristen, it's so exciting to have you join us since you've been instrumental in Boston's adoption of the college and career life readiness model and now serve in the role of supporting the city's Office of Early Childhood. What are your reactions to what's been presented and discussed so far today?
Well, it's interesting. The first thing I want to do is jump up and down and say yes, because I think that this work is really exciting. And it's exciting not only for young children now, but for the young adults that they will become. When we first created our college career and life readiness framework, it was this beautiful picture and it showed the progression. And I put it in front of one of our early childhood educators who was on the board, and she's like, "Oh, this is what we do in early childhood." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, this is what we do in early childhood. We help young people explore and figure out who they want to be someday, and we do it in developmentally appropriate ways." And I was like, great. And at the time, I was working more in sort of the middle school to college completion part of the educational pipeline. And so I was like, well, that's really nice. And now, as I've moved to being more deeply embedded in just focusing on early childhood, it is what we hear from families. They want opportunities that are deep and rich for their young people to connect to experiences. And I think these shows are one of those ways. And, when Professor Howard was talking about the things that she liked in the show, I was like, yes, it's all about curiosity. I love the modeling. I loved, all the different pieces of it. But the piece that I really loved was the fact that it focused on the young children actually playing. Because a lot of what young children learn is through play. And the relationships that they build with other children in play, the experimentation that they get to do. And so to have that very meaningfully connected to career exploration and the kinds of things that you could become, I think both feels familiar for children, but also is just opens a whole new vista of things for them to experiment with and think about and be exposed to. And particularly for some of our children who live in cities and maybe don't get out of their own neighborhood or have a lot of experiences with the real breadth of college and career planning and workforce development and career development. Like, this is really an opportunity for them to think about and make connections between what they experience, and in this case, the young person with the weather and a meteorologist, and perhaps who they want to be. So I was super excited to see the really rich content because, we work so hard to move it from 9/12 to 7/12. And now I'm like, oh, look, we could move it all the way down and really connect it to the things that young people are growing and experiencing. So I was excited.
Thank you so much. Eva?
We have some time to hear some more from the panel before we open it up to questions and comments from the audience. I see there's one in the Q&A queue right now. Feel free this time to add others to the question and answer session. But I'm going to throw my panel a little curveball. So I happen to know quite a few of you very, very well, and I know you have your own children. And I'm wondering, sort of from your perspective as a parent, how do you think about your children's early childhood experiences to get interest in sort of their future selves? And how would they have received programs like this if they existed, some of your children are older, when your children were at that age.
Did you want to call somebody out?
Yeah, I'm actually Scott and Kim. I was going to call you out because I recall a story about your daughter when she was younger, and you asked her what she wanted to be. She gave an answer before she learned more about careers, and then she had a different answer. So, Dr. Howard, can I call you out?
You know, I would be happy to tell that story, but Scott tells it so much better.
Actually, no,
So
that's
let's
not
see if
true.
he'll come off mute here and give the story.
All right. So, yeah, so our daughter, she must have been, and I'll get corrected on this, maybe two and a half, really young. And we were asking her, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's just what, it's always a question. I think we ask, a natural thing to ask. And she said, I want to be a princess. And honestly, when she said that, and I'm a big fan of always using the word great, because I want to encourage. And I'm like, you know what? As parents, if you're the princess, I'm thinking we could get something out of this, right? Maybe a little castle somewhere, maybe some new, we'll get something, right? This is a good thing. So we want to lean into it. But we really, wanted to know what that was all about. So we said, so what is it that a princess does? She goes, oh, they sing and dance. We went, okay, all right, good. So we got a couple of skills there. So then we decided to intervene because you have two career psychologists in the family already. So we start bringing in the science. In this case, it was space, lots of books around space and all the astronauts and everything. And about 6 months later, we said, so dear, what do you want to be? She goes, I want to be an astronaut princess. And we went, so great. And can anyone tell me what that means and how she would have responded? What is it that an astronaut princess does? They sing and dance in space. And again, my first thought was, well, if you're heading to Mars, you got to have something else to go with, right? So I can see that as an important skill set. So yes, so that was really fun to watch. And Professor Howard, why don't you just take a minute then and explain what that was about? Because you've written the theory on how all of that, what that's all about for early childhood.
Sure. So, what we know about kids at that age is that the way that they understand work is very magical. And it is based on kind of the very few things that they see. And the way that they understand how you get into work is by kind of putting on the things that the people wear or use, right? So it's by association. So, when I was in some of my early research, I was doing interviews with children in kindergarten, which I have to say is probably like the best research to do, is interviewing kindergartners. Such fun. And I would ask them about different occupations that they had identified and how somebody gets into that. And one example was a firefighter. And the idea of how you do that is you put on the jacket and you put on the boots and you get your fire puppy, which Dalmatian, and that's how you do it. You just kind of show up and put on the things, and there you are. So it really is this kind of magical connection. Things just kind of happen. And you just kind of need the trappings of the occupation, and that's how you do it. And so, for her, she's watching lots of these Disney princess movies where they sing and they dance. And so that's her conceptualization of what it was to be a princess. And, astronaut, the only thing that she really knew is that that's something you do out in space. So putting those together at that age was kind of a natural combination because that's the level of understanding that she had. So, yeah.
And then Ava, I know you're going to want to get the other panelists in, but I just wanted to tie it back then to what was so exciting as I watch What Can You Become, is that's an intervention. We're helping them actually see a range of skills and a storyline of what's involved in that occupation. And to see the young child take on the mannerisms, the voice, and the pace and the style is just so exciting. And they're getting really accurate information about how we go about doing that. So I feel like that's the part we can actually, I know there's a magical component at the starting point, but what can we do to then help add more complexity to their understanding of this world of work? So it's just amazing to see it as it comes together.
Love it. I'm wondering if anybody on the panel wants to reflect on what Dr. Howard and Dr. Solberg share, or embarrass your children with any other similar kinds of stories that you have reflecting on their career development and how a program like this can help.
I'll just share one thing. So my children, I have a 19 and 18 and a 16-year-old, and they grew up on Peppa Pig. So it's our favorite show. We watched it all the time. And for about 4 years, they all spoke with an English accent. And so, those kinds of little things. But I think probably Mrs. Rabbit from Peppa Pig was their favorite character because she showed up everywhere, being a pilot, working at the grocery store, doing all those things. And I think it's those actual moments where you can be anything, and it happens to be a central character that shows up and does all these jobs, which I think has been a really eye-opening experience for the shift from what cartoons used to be and children's program used to be like to sort of modern day programming. But it's just extraordinary. And I do the subtlety of language. What do you want to become as opposed to who do you want to be? I think has been a really nice shift, very subtle, but very intentional. I think that's something I noticed quite openly on lots of the different channels.
That is super, super helpful to get that kind of reflective perspective. And we got a great question in the chat about the career exploration in early childhood, and how is that different from exploration for older children and adolescents? Thank you, Jackie Ford, for putting that in the chat. A lot of the elements that you all described here, all children need at all developmental stages. So how is early childhood unique in terms of the approach to have them thinking about, what they want to be and what they can do?
I think that, I think that having those shows are really good, because if a child doesn't know that they might be interested in dance or acting or some of those things, you can bring out some of those talents and those skills that, because they're telling you, I'm interested in that. And you can have them venture out into some of those areas and see if they, in fact, really enjoy doing those type of things. So that gives you some different extracurriculum activities and brings out a lot of their talents at an early age.
Yeah, I love that. As we were beginning the show, Kristen McSwain talked about her development. So she really led a movement in Boston. She's quite modest about it, but we have this college career and life framework that she briefly touched upon. But you had mentioned, Kristen, that, originally it was developed sort of thinking about older children and adolescents. And now you are the head of the early childhood office. And I'm sure you have made that connection even more completely than you have before. And you're also a parent. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
I am a parent, and in this framework that we created, it was all about helping young people set a vision for themselves, choose answering that question, who do you want to become? So it's really that question has been applied to a younger audience. And then thinking about, okay, how do I explore getting there? So for the teenagers, it was, how do I choose a course and explore it? But then the next piece is, how do I change course? Because none of us, I would imagine, or maybe very few of us, I certainly am not one, I'm not doing today what I intended to do when I went to college I'm not doing today what I intended to do 10 years ago. And hopefully 10 years from now, I'm going to be doing something equally interesting, but maybe not the same, right? And so how do you learn to pivot? How do you do those executive functioning pieces that everybody has just talked about? Those things start developmentally when you're young. And so how do you begin to build those skills? And so what I really like about the work that we've seen today is that it is taking what are really concrete developmental skills that young children have and need to do well at, and saying, you should do more of these. This is, explore these things. The other thing that occurs to me as we were doing the college career and life readiness framework, the jobs of today may or may not be the jobs of the future. But what we do know is that employers are looking for your ability to ask questions and to be curious, because that's how you grow and learn in a job and how you might move from one job into the next. So in addition to really focusing on, here are the wide range of things that I could do, and in this case, the video we saw was about weather, but it also showed young people learning to ask questions, to be thinking deeply about the evidence that's placed in front of them, and then to be able to take thinking about meteorology and say, oh, but you know what, it could also apply to this oceanographer, which is deep in the water, right? It doesn't seem like it's the same, but they are connected. So helping young people really do that deep thinking about the kinds of knowledge that they already have and how it might be applied is, to me, something that's really excited to see in early childhood, because we haven't sort of schooled that innate curiosity out of them quite yet. So if we can get it to be really deep in early childhood, that is, I think, going to benefit all of us as we think about the kind of curiosity, deep critical thinking, and use of evidence that we want all of our kids to be able to do, regardless of what their chosen career path is.
I love that you said, I'm going to repeat this quote, that they have a lot of curiosity and they're ready to explore until it's schooled out of them.
Yes, I did use those words.
Well, when we think about it, young children, and I love it, young children, they have no problem setting a vision, right? I mean, they can set a vision to be an astronaut princess. I can't do that, but they can. And we also know young children at that age, they can pivot very quickly, because one day they want to be an astronaut, the next day they want to be an astronaut princess, the next day they want to be a fire person. And isn't this so good that they can put on those hats? They can dress up in those outfits. So I say that to say, in answer to response to Jackie's question, how is career exploration in early childhood different? I would say and I'll just sort of bring my experience as a middle school educator and school leader before I became, went into other work in education. And by the time they are older children and adolescents, they are ready. They're past that sort of stage of intense, I'm going to explore everything, I'm just going to be innocent and open the world. They start forming and crystallizing these identities. And sometimes it's about where they don't see themselves as opposed to where they do. So to start in early childhood, I think is one of the most critical things we can do and least talked about. And so having them be able to keep, not develop, but keep that curiosity, keep that initiative, keep that vision, keep that ability to evolve their identities, their emerging career identities, not just as children, but all their lives. Because as Kristen said, I don't think any of us thought we were going to be here in this particular job, right? You have to continue evolving your career identity. So I think that's the big difference, is that what your work here is doing is preserving the ability to develop career pathways on your own for the rest of your life. Anybody want to disagree with me? I love a good debate.
Ava, actually, could I just accentuate something that you said?
Please.
Okay, so you were talking about that curiosity, and I think that is, for me, such an important, because of that, that's such an important reason for us to be starting career education, career exposure at a young age, because I'm tired of hearing people say, "Oh, that's too young. That's too young to start." And the challenge there and the pushback is, no, it's not too young, because they're doing it anyways. The young kids are so curious. They are looking around. They're meaning-making machines. They are looking around at what they're seeing around them. They are seeing patterns, or what they think are patterns, and they're making assumptions about, they're making meaning of that, and they're making assumptions about that. And sometimes those assumptions are things we don't want them to be kind of taking in and believing, and then having that be some, like, a foundational core belief about the world of work and their place in the world of work, or not, right? They're places where they don't see themselves. And so we can pretend like it's not going on, but it's going on. If you pretend like it's not going on, then when you finally get around to working with kids, maybe middle school, oftentimes it's high school, then you've had all those years of those foundational beliefs that you're trying to challenge, counter, unravel, so that you can start again, when we can be starting from a much better place, and helping them develop that really broad foundation and that sense of possibilities. What can I become?
That is so important. Gee, I could see you just came off mute.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some of the social emotional learning skills that are sort of across, in the broad areas. They were the early adopters, early childhood, across all the states, because there are very specific skills that allow you to just sort of interact with others, right? Making friends, keeping friends, and then how do you sort of go into groups. I actually think that we start to shift the language around what skills. It doesn't actually matter what the career path. It actually matters the skills that we're building to be cooperative, kind people that are good listeners, and then can actually have a conversation. I think that is exactly sort of the shift that we need to see. And I think that's what early childhood programming, I think does for kids, is it's really modeling all of those relationship skills that I think are probably the most critical, not knowing what kinds of jobs that they'll be, there in the future. But I think that part, I think, just to underscore, it's the skills and sort of the interpersonal skills, I think. And we all know that those folks who have that are generally the ones that can keep their jobs, regardless of content knowledge. And any of us who are employers, I would much rather hire someone who is curious, have all those skills, can get along with people, than someone who just knows the content, but is very difficult and challenging to be around. So I think those are a little bit of the shift in how we talk about career development and pathways as well.
I'm going to jump in for a second and just share some insight from a school counselor that practiced K through 12. And one of the things that I have incidental evidence on is that many kids close doors on careers by the time they're in first, second, and third grade. So it's imperative that we're doing this with younger children so that we can keep those doors open. And make no mistake that those things you do with those kids stick. When our students in my school district did exit interviews, every year, 2 or 3 of them would mention an activity that I did with them when they were in kindergarten, first and second grade, called "What Hat Would You Wear?" And one kid one year even had the paper hat that I used as a graphic organizer and brought that to his exit interview. So what is happening in early childhood and early public education for kids with careers is keeping that curiosity live, but it's also keeping the doors open.
That is great. Now I am thinking about all of these teacher activities and parent activities that you can do after watching Lyla in the Loop or another one of these kids shows. Like now I want them to make hats that they can wear and put on the hat and then take it off and put on another one. I love that. So Anne and Dave, I'm wondering how you think about some of the extension activities that parents and educators and children can do after they have watched some of these shows. Like what are the kinds of things that would keep the conversation going and engage them more deeply?
And do you want to go or shall I?
You go ahead, Dave, and then I'll layer on.
Sure. Well, I can speak to what we're doing for Lyla in the Loop, and you know, it's connecting to the previous part of the conversation, and that you know, we're thinking that it's important for sort of for the idea of a future career to stick. One thing that has to happen is you have to be able to have that identity in yourself, to think that I can do that, and just enjoy the activities that are happening now. That maybe we don't need to foreclose on a particular career path, but we, you know, within a family structure where certainly, you know, whoever the caregivers are, and certainly teachers and other, you know, people who influence kids' lives outside of the family, you know, what they even implicitly sort of emote or signal about what your potential is going to have a big impact on what you even spend time on doing now. You know, if we're putting down careers in the arts for some reason because we don't feel like it's financially viable or whatever, I think it's going to probably have a dampening effect on that child's view of who they are and what they might become. So in our activities, they're aimed not just at the kid, but at the whole family to enjoy. And so we have a deck of cards. Everyone remember the old, maybe they still make them, Brain Quest cards that like they fan out like paint chips sort of. And we have a set of, you know, a little under 50 different sort of mini activities that you could do with your kids with little to no prep or materials. You know, for example, make up a dance, 3 moves, teach it to each other, then dance it. You know, the sequencing and the executive function it takes to control and do those things in a step. Or, you know, you do a rainbow scavenger hunt. Like, all right, let's look around. Can we get every color in the rainbow from here? You know, the more unique, the better. So it's categorically as something, or the list goes on. And the point of it is, again, these are all activities which are meant to feel very achievable. I don't have to feel like I'm a tech person or a math person or any kind of person to do them as a parent. And we can just enjoy the time spent together. So that's our approach on it, is to, again, make it feel very achievable in the moment now in your life, rather than something you do in the future when you're like better at something, whatever that even means.
Yeah, that's definitely an aspect of all our you know, outreach programming. We want everything to be very accessible, not scary for parents to you know, get involved with. I will say just in general, when we're creating the core content itself, so Lyla is a really great example for that. And I was channeling with Dave. I said, I wish we could show a little clip. So I don't know if he dug anything up that we might be able to share, but you can find Lyla on our platforms. But you know, just in the stories themselves, because it's this family unit in a community, there are you know, they're interacting with members of the community and with each other. we're also thinking a lot about what those adult characters are doing in this show too, because we know caregivers and parents and others are often in the spaces with their child. And so even if they're not sitting there watching, though we hope they are, because we know kids will learn more if they are sitting right there and co-viewing. We hope they, they're also listening and hearing. Like we're intentional about the language that the parents are using with the kids. And, so there's a lot of modeling going on in our content for caregivers too, not just, the kids themselves. So, I think that's like a big piece of what we try to do also. We're not just thinking of the kids.
Love it. And you place some of those resources in the chat. So thank you so much. And thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kim. Almost called you Dr. Howard. Thank you, Chi. Thank you, Kristen. What a fantastic conversation. I'm going to turn the reins over to our Vice President for Research at the CCD Center and also the Wheelock Center for Future Readiness Co-Director, Dr. Scott Solberg.
All right.
Open up our discussion more.
All right, and I'm joined by one of a dear colleague, Nermeen Dashush, who's a professor, faculty member with our Wheelock College, and also specializing in early childhood, and has been a head advisor with Lyla and the Loops and a lot of the PBS programming as well. So excited to have a chance. She and I've not really had a chance to talk about all of this stuff. So it was one of the reasons I was hoping to have a connection. And panelists, don't go away, because I think we have a couple of things to come in with. But Nermeen, I wanted to, as I'm watching this, and I think that question we had about what is exploration in early childhood, how is it different than older childhood? And Dave, I really appreciate you throwing the word identity in, because I think that it's really that the mirrors and the sliding glass doors that we're trying to create in early childhood, where they actually can see themselves and can begin practicing some of those skill sets that are involved in those occupations. And if they're not entering kindergarten and first grade with an idea that they can become those things, they often get shut down and they don't come back, right? And so this idea of showing role models and really just inviting and a caring, encouraging adult showcasing this. And so I'm thinking, that to me was one of the things I was so excited to see in that clip. And we've seen it also, and we can talk more about Lyla and the Loop and the things that are going on in there as well.
Yeah, like they're defining at that age, like, and I hear adults say it all the time. I'm not a science person. I'm not a math person, right? I am not, I'm not a disturbed person. I'm not that person, right? And they kind of identified themselves as not somebody that's belonging to a community very early on. And I think this approach is not saying that there is no such thing as a math person or a science person. These are practices that it's not even about becoming them later, that you are them now. And I think that's a really powerful message for young children.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, you talked about, the Lyla and the Loop is when we had the chance, and Nermeen and I think we're both honored to be able to be at the kind of premiere opening of this whole thing. But to watch the children react to what was happening, I thought was amazing. And love for you to talk about that, just the music part, but also you created a situation where the parents were modeling, it's not our job to solve everything. And there's one episode where they're having trouble getting to school on time. And more than that, getting out of the door down to the bus on time. And they just stepped back and said, you guys deal with it. You handle it, right? Phenomenal role modeling and showing the case. So you're not just showing the kids that they're problem solving, you're teaching parents, here's the strategy, right? So if you could just comment on it, it was just such a great episode to be able to witness.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, that one resonated a lot with our audiences as well, because being on time to stuff is a common human experience, certainly a common parent caregiver experience, for sure. Yeah, it's true, because Lyla and her three siblings always missed the bus. The parents said that, we tried everything. Making favorite breakfast, preparing this, that, and the other way. Now it's time for you all to try to figure something out. And they said, let us check in. They're there, they're not just throwing up their hands and being like, we can't solve this, you fix it. It's like, let's have you take a turn. Let's see what you can come up with creatively. And so they do. They work through a bunch of different options, some which seem to work, some which don't. They target each of their siblings' specific morning hang up, like where's the problem with your morning routine? Is it picking out clothes? Is it waking up on time? Is it teeth brushing? Whatever it is. And that's something we come back to throughout the series is that when Lyla or her siblings do run into a problem, we try to make it such that the parents are, they're supportive and they're present to answer questions and like come in a pinch and, help them sort of think it through. But the kids are in the driver's seat to take the next step, and to bring their ideas to the table. And the parents are accepting of those ideas, even when they probably know it's not going to work. Maybe the first time, second time, it's like, okay, let's try it out, see what happens. Of course, within the boundaries of safety and, and all the rest of it are important, but.
And humor, the humor is good too.
And humor, of course, yeah.
But Nermeen, as you were talking about, I was watching, and I know there's a computational kind of component to the training, but I was also watching a scientist being born, right? They're problem solving, they're hypothesizing, they're testing out ways to solve things. I thought that was a fantastic element to the shows as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a question earlier about like what is the difference between career development for older children and younger children. When I'm working with older adults around even understanding science and being part of the science community, a lot of it is undoing what they think science is. And a lot, getting them to practice it, to really undo what their perceptions of science is. With young children, I think we're at the point where they're developing what science is. And I think breaking it down to that level, like granular level of practices and not specifically who does science or science is a very limited practice is what the show is trying to do. Showing us that we practice science and computational thinking, computer science as we go about our day in restaurants, in doctors' offices. That kind of helps children define what science is in a very broad definition that includes themselves.
And then I just wanted to also call out, and you at PBS Kids, you're also building all kinds of support resources for families. And I think you're calling it bundling, right? We're bundling different shows, different elements to really help the family. As Dave was saying, it becomes a family project, right? And I just want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that because I think it's a really exciting resource that parents have.
Yeah, so there's a lot of my colleagues are doing that work to look at ways to pull content together that's meaningful, that's focusing on similar, themes or goals. One of the bundles that incorporates some of the World of Work content is based on one of the themes from What Can You Become, which was nurturers. Each of the episodes has sort of a kid-friendly kind of theme, and it's connected to sometimes a social emotional thing. So then with nurturers theme, there's a episode about a nurse, but then other content that has been made for PBS Kids and other properties has a similar theme and reflects similar skills has been kind of curated and brought together, and they're still getting some of exactly how that will be distributed and out to the educator, but they're looking at that and finding ways through our parents' website and through our PBS Learning Media platform, which I put a couple of those links in the chat, where caregivers and educators can easily find that curated content to, continue to sort of build on the skills that they might see in one specific program. So it's a way for parents to say, oh, my kid really loved that, and I loved that message. I loved what they were learning there. How can, where can I find more? What our team is working on is sort of pulling that together so parents and caregivers don't have to go and search and find, that it be more presented to them in an easy to find way and allow them to do that work.
It's great. That's great. So
As-
we have plenty of time for people if you want to throw in some questions in the chat, and we can bring you off and to talk about it, have some conversation. I saw, Andrea, you put in a link to some resources that you have from Wisconsin, which is exciting. There's a web page there, and so some of you started to share some of that, which is fantastic. If you have some of those, and it sounds like a number of you are also interested in not just the early childhood, but also up to middle school and high school, and wanted to let you know our center is definitely involved in that space too. So if you reach out to us, we can share some free access resources and things that are happening in that space. So that's something that we've been heavily involved in as well, just getting out lessons for educators, but also resources that are just, as I said, open, and so you can make your own as we go forward. But Nermeen, any comments or thoughts or things that or questions for the panelists, I think?
There's a question in the chat, and I think it's connected also to what Anne was saying. So kind of a two-part question. Anne was talking about caregivers and how they can support their children. But I guess the question to the panel is, how are we also simultaneously educating caregivers themselves, right? I remember when first watching the show, I remember I was writing about it, and I said, when we grew up, my parents only thought there were 3 careers, right? And this could be we were immigrant families. We came to this country for education. And so there were only 3 I actually became one of those careers. So there was only 3, my other sisters became the others. So there was only 3 possible careers anyway. So how are we simultaneously helping families themselves learn about career possibilities? And in the chat, there's a question too about how this is expanding into schools, and how are we helping schools on a more formal education level embrace these concepts?
That's a great question. We've got some school counselors too that are in the midst here that are doing things. But I know, Professor Howard, you've been studying school counselors and the ways in which they're involved in career development, maybe some of the early childhood areas.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for the question. I saw that in the chat. One of the things that I really want classroom teachers to know is that their school counselor in their building is such an ally in this. And school counseling training includes training in fostering career development. And so what I like to see is the partnering between the school counselor and the classroom teacher. So we know that school counselors can be doing classroom guidance and can have lessons with kids. But when they partner with the classroom teacher, then you have, first of all, 2 adults that are working with youth around career development, but then it also is a way for that to whether the school counselor is in the classroom or not, that those themes continue to get echoed when you are partnering with the classroom teacher. And then also when the classroom teacher has multiple things that they're trying to balance, but they're saying, I'd like to figure out ways to build career development in, that partnership with the school counselor can find just the natural, the natural add-ons to the units that you're doing in science. And then how can you add a piece on to explore the people that are in different occupations that have to do with whatever it is the topic is that you're studying in science at that time. I was talking to this was a couple maybe a month or so back. We were having an event at BU for admitted students for our graduate programs, and I was talking to a new master student who was going into educational leadership, but she is coming with a background in being a classroom teacher. And we were talking about the power of her partnering with a school counselor when they have a field trip. So they're going to the field trip for a particular reason, but then by partnering with a school counselor, she's able to then expand and add in some career exploration into that field trip while they're out doing that. And that may not be something that as a classroom teacher you're always ready to do, but when you have that partner of a school counselor, then you're more than the sum of your parts in what you can provide to students.
Yeah, let me also kind of come off of that. I'm going to put a link in here, and trying to see if Aaron Jakes was still on, but this is from Boston Public Schools, where they're helping classroom educators connect this in the middle and high school space. But we're also bringing it down into the elementary space too. And I know our state leader, Lisa Harney, who's been great at advocating and is leading the state effort in this as well, is going to be spending the summer with school educators at the elementary level to really bring this down. And what it becomes is, you're right, as you're saying, I was just listening to, I'm sorry, saying you're right, Amy, you're right, no comment. The teachers are doing this work, and one of the things we've been doing is having the school counselors and their team of educators do a survey to find out what kinds of activities they are doing. First, to find out the learning objectives that we want to have around our SEL and around our kind of future readiness, right? And then what are you doing in the classroom? And it's amazing to see this whole wide range of things happening that they're already doing naturally, right? And then what we want to do is build that so that all students are getting access. And so it is things that we can be doing in the classroom, and it does take some career technologies for some of the more advanced things, like learning, what are these things really about? But so much of the conversation and the encouragement really needs to happen in that classroom space, and teachers are just natural for doing those kinds of things. So it is pretty exciting to see how it's starting to get adopted, and how schools are starting to really embrace these kinds of efforts. And as we heard, preschool teachers have been doing it since day one. Some other thoughts, questions?
So, Scott, one of the things I wanted to just double down on that you just said is that preschool teachers have been doing it for a long time. And I think in the chat, someone, also pointed out that teachers are doing career development skills. I think part of what we need to do is bring attention to that connection with some intentionality, because people who don't actually understand that that's what they're doing, when you say to them, you need to do career development, they're like, well, that's not it. That's not what I do. Right. And so what's the connection from those skills we've just been talking about and how you obtain them? So that I love the idea of bringing a counselor with you on a field trip. I think that's great. But what are the other kinds of really simple things like that we can suggest to people that help them make that intentional connection between what they're doing with young people at whatever age they are, and where we want to see young people grow, develop, and how we help them become? I think that the adults are sometimes part of the problem because we lack the intentionality to name the things that we are doing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right on. That's great. We've been working, we've been training schools around this process all spring, and we have them at the end give the phrase that pays, right? How are you going to sell and get the buy-in? And the word career doesn't show up, right? It's like, are you ready for your future? Are you, do we want our students to be engaged in school because they see its relevance, right? Well, they can't have relevance if they don't see it leading towards, that future. And things like that. So yeah, it's exciting when you start to see the different ways in which we can conceptualize what this is really about. And we used to be called the Center for Career Readiness, and we changed it to Future Readiness because we think the word career just has too much baggage, right, on so many different levels. And then when you talk about a preschool, it's like, no, as we heard at the very beginning, right, we're not trying to get every young child to have a career. We're trying to help them think about, learn about, and learn through. Because then once they see how exciting it is, then they go back, well, how do I get there? Who knew? You have to learn math. You got to be good at reading. You've got to be good at problem solving, right? All of these things that become more relevant as a result of my exploring these possibilities and potentialities. And then, of course, the identity and really helping create a more equitable future as well. It means we really have to get those role models in there to showcase that we can all, start entering some of these places and what it takes to do that. So it's a very exciting area. And if we can get rid of that word career, I do think it can work. And I take that because as we look internationally, my colleagues in South Africa, it's about hope and purpose. It really is. You have such a large youth unemployment rate and people just not seeing anything. How do we give them a sense of hope and purpose? And right now is a great time to be talking about that because we've got a lot of angry people. We've got a whole epidemic that we've had to survive. We've got a world of work that feels like is very nebulous and uncertain. How do we help find a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of contribution within this space? And I think our children are on it. They want that, and they really do elevate their game when it comes to education when they get that connection made. So So these kind of shows, like we're doing PBS, it sets such a great foundation because it's showing, wow, there's excitement, there's exciting things here, right? And then like in Lyla, we're teaching the skills to try to start navigating through that. So it's all fantastic. Nermeen, I'm looking at you because I just stopped talking and I didn't want to keep talking.
I wanted to open it up. We had kind of addressed the teacher, like how should we be engaging teachers? How could we make it more intentional for them? This is also a great point for teachers who say, oh, I don't have time. We don't have time for that in the day, by showing it that they're already doing it. And it's more of about a skill and pointing out skills instead of teaching specifically, this is what a marine biologist does, right? They're actually teaching while they're playing. You're already doing what these careers do.
Right.
Can we explore the other part of that as well, around families, expanding families' understanding of careers, especially families who might not. We have first generation college students, families that might not have or be exposed to those opportunities themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know, Professor Howard, you've got a whole international crew in your doctoral program talking about how parents kind of influence that process. It's not just in the U.S. And so I don't know if you had any thoughts on that whole piece. It's a really important area, helping parents, helping build their capacity to understand the different possibilities. So it's not
Right.
just 3 careers, as Nermeen's parents were talking about.
Right. Well, I think that Anne, I think it was Anne that was speaking earlier about how when they are creating the content for Lyla in the Loop, thinking about then there being caregivers in the room. And that's one way, that's such a lovely way of also providing access to that, because we have to find the places where we can do this. With kids, we have them in the classroom. So we have, we have the opportunity right there, but we don't have the parents, the caregivers that often. We don't always have that type of access. And so we need to be thinking creatively about what are the ways that we can reach them? What are the avenues that we might have that we can provide this to them? Whether that is, maybe blogs on common websites that parents may go to, or other places where we can capture them to provide this information. Because what I have found, even in those, I do a lot of trainings for professionals, and sometimes for like schools that will provide webinars for parents. And I always get the question of, how do I help when there's a family that's really focused on, as Nermeen was talking about, 3 occupations, and to help them go beyond that. And one of the things that I always come back to is that, parents, for the most part, and caregivers are, they want the best for their kids. And there's a reason why they have identified these 3 occupations, because those 3 occupations mean something to them. They see that as being connected to stability, a good income, good, a good life later on, right? They want that for their kids. And so I think that's the place where we need to start, is recognizing that it's not about those 3 occupations, it's what those 3 occupations then represent. And if we can start from that place, then we're in a good position to help parents to acknowledge that with parents and say, let's look at the whole some other options and how that might work. But it is a question as to how do we reach out to them. We can think about the types of materials and the types of resources that we could create that would be really user friendly and easy for parents to pick up. And we have to figure out how to deliver those, how to get those to them so that they know where to go to find that. And so I'd be really interested in what other people's other ideas are. I know I've been trying to be thinking this through and keeping a list for when the question comes to me, and I'm always curious about what other people have found.
Mhm. It's a really interesting issue, because we have a situation where parents do not know all the areas of the world of work that are happening, right? And so they're going based on what they know, and they are nervous, and they do want what's best for their children. What we're finding in the kind of the expanded role we're trying to play in schools is trying to provide a richer understanding of what's there, and then help parents connect to that. So we had a case when we were doing this work in Singapore. We had a young child who was basically getting ready to drop out of school because they were so upset that the parent wasn't letting them become a male nurse. And the counselor said, great, this is what we're going to do. I want you to go home, take all the information you've learned about yourself, show them on the online system all the stuff you've done, and then see what happens. And he came back the next day and said, yeah, my dad said that would be great. So it's like by learning about it, seeing the income, seeing the stability, seeing the outlook, all of that stuff, it helped them say, wow, this is much more than I ever thought, right? So this idea that we really need to help build parents' understanding, and I see that this is what's happening and starting point within the PBS Kids is we're starting to help parents see natural curiosity are the building blocks. How can we help support you as parents to continue with that banging on the pots that's driving you nuts? That could be music, that could be cooking. We got so many pathways, right, that we could go with that. Let's just lean into it and keep it going. And then when you do the bundling activities, you're still providing them with resources so they can contribute to that building a solid identity. So but really, thank you. Rich conversation. I do want to flip it out a little bit. I want to invite David Mosey to come off mute and talk about smart futures. I've been hearing about this a lot, and I just thought it would be a chance to hear. And we've got some others that have specific programs they're in. It would be nice to hear how you're engaging in some of this career development work in your own settings. So let's start with David, and if you want to raise your hand or put something in the comment in the chat box, we can try to get to as many as we can, just to hear about some of the ways you're all involved in this space.
Yeah, Scott, what a surprise. I mean, I wasn't expecting on participant. I'm here in learn mode, but it's great. I'll be happy to share. I am the director of a nonprofit in Pittsburgh, and our state, I've been a lifer in this field. I've been doing this. I turned 60 this year. I've been doing this for 40, probably a long time anyway. And our state had passed a mandate that made career education as important as math and reading, came out with a set of standards, mandated that they be taught in classrooms. And for a person that's been in this field as a software developer, you could imagine how excited I was about this opportunity, because we had already pushed out a lot of programs that had been adopted within districts here already. So we had a name, we had some momentum already, and partnered with Carnegie Mellon. I'm in Pittsburgh. If you've ever been to Pittsburgh, I'm right next to between Google and Trader Joe's, if you know Pittsburgh well. And partnered with Carnegie Mellon. We have some Carnegie Mellon students here, some of our summer interns that are going to be coming on. And one of the key things was building a curriculum that was aligned to our state standards. We have 4 sets of standards, 23 standards each, which if you multiply that by 4, that's how much curriculum activities we needed to build. And so we thought, why not be the first state that creates custom curriculum online activities that make it very easy for students, for schools to comply with this stuff. And so we were forced to kind of become experts in this very quickly now, and fortunately, everybody understands these kind of things. Like you said, you don't even have to use the word career. It really is such practical stuff. And I wasn't surprised at all. Once we developed the curriculum, we went back and aligned them to SEL standards. And sure enough, our curriculum hit every single one of the SEL benchmarks. It was kind of expected that to happen, but to our delight, it turned out that way. And so what we're really pushing is an employability skills curriculum. Some people in Pennsylvania, don't want to hear about social emotional learning. So it's all about employability skills, and it's all about.
That's right.
And the couple things that we're missing that I just would suggest that I think are helpful to think about is, if you're going to do this, and let me just state that as a nonprofit, the reason we think this is so important, the reason we've devoted our lives to this, is because if career education is important as all of us think it is, then we should not be passing kids from school to school without saving this data in some form, so that the person that adopts the kid next can use that same data, whether it's workforce, summer programs, career and technical schools, regular schools. So what we did is we built a portable system so that as kids travel across Pennsylvania, they're taking their artifacts with them. And, I think it's critical. No, software companies don't do that. And they could have.
Yeah.
They could have done that.
You're right. And you're hitting on some really technical areas that we will be coming back to in future conversations on career technologies, because that issue of the portfolio and the work and how it gets caught up in the proprietariness of a particular system has always been a challenge. But thank you for sharing that. That's really exciting. Nermeen, I've been listening, so I haven't been looking. I saw Anne, you put in some great stuff around the podcast platform.
Yeah, just that it's a different, that platform is different, right, from our other things where parents might hand kids a tablet and they pick what they want. Podcasts are typically, it's parent choice, like it's not as accessible in the same way directly by a child, and we're learning a lot about it. And Jamming on the Job was one of our first original content podcasts, and we did a lot of testing during the development of that. So bringing in kids and families and having them listen together. And we had so many parents commenting on like, wow, that was really interesting. I didn't know about these fire, inspectors and different things. Like, so it was, we really were thinking about highlighting careers that were less, known, right? And that that we could, provide that exposure. And the podcast format in particular, it's almost like you have a better idea that there are likely caregivers in that audience space with the child. So that's an interesting one. And then of course we have our social media platforms where we're also putting out messages related to the career content, and and leading parents to the all that auxiliary material that's available.
Yeah, and I wanted, Alice, if you're still there, I'd love for you to come off and talk about school counselor as a profession and the role it's playing in trying to elevate. You're not using necessarily the word, you're using mindsets, behaviors, using career conversations and starter things that are happening. Just to give a sense of how the profession is trying to align itself in supporting that whole exploration.
So am I off mute?
Yeah, you're
okay.
Good.
So I'm retired, and what I can tell you is a day away from the trenches is like 100 years in the timeline. But I have the luxury, working with David, of staying in close contact and supporting school counselors. He supports a statewide network support meeting 4 times a year for counselors, even if their districts don't use Smart Futures. And what we're finding from those folks is something we've known for a really long time. Career development is the light at the end of the tunnel for so many kids that live in situations where they might not have any other hope. When school counselors are talking, even with little kids, about how it can be different for you, how can your life be different? Career development's the way. One of the things our platform does, but I think school counselors who work really well with kids do, is they help kids graduate from learning who they are, where they're going, and how they're going to get there. And when you were talking earlier about the relevance piece, that's where the hands-on stuff becomes critical. And it's easy for early childhood, but for so long, nobody paid attention to them playing about careers. And then at the high school level, it's critical, but PSSAs took over for so long that kids didn't have any time to get out of the classroom and do anything else. And that pendulum has shifted a bit, and the opportunity is open, but school counselors need support because they're drowning, because there's so many other things going on. So one of the things that I hope happens today, we have a Facebook page, and I'm hoping when this recording is available, I'd love to put that out there on our Facebook page for our elementary counselors in Pennsylvania that work, because many of them work with pre-K, because many school districts have pre-K programs. I'd love for them to be able to just listen to this, to remind them that stuff that they're doing is just as
Relevant. It's so
as
important. Yep.
everything else that they're being asked to do.
And we'll have it up on our CCD. It's the Coalition for Career Development Center.org. It'll be up on that website under the forum section. So thank you. I think you're right. We want to get it out. We'll get it out to our state leaders network as well. Let's do one final piece here, and then I think we can begin closing for today. But Amanda, you brought in the career conversation starters and from ASCA, and I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about it because I think that is such a critical way of helping showcase for educators and parents. We can have these conversations. It's not a complex thing to just start with that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the most underutilized resources provided by ASCA for school counselors to move this work forward. They have them broken down by general ones, high school, middle school, elementary. There's post-secondary ones for business partners. And I think back to when I was a baby counselor, even when I was a teacher, and asking the right question it's so important to get what it is you're looking for, get to that root cause, to get to that. And this was something I struggled with as a teacher that my cooperating teacher and my university person worked with me a lot on. And I really, when I was still working for the State Department at Arizona, these were something that I really pushed out to the field because I'm seeing the same thing of frustration from school counselors, like not getting what they want from their kids and families, but it really comes back to us not asking the questions in a way to get the responses that we want. And so every chance I have when I do any trainings or any professional learning or development, I bring in this resource because it's all there. I also found them very helpful in IEP and 504 meetings when I had very negative parents towards their students, and trying to reframe some of the conversation to get parents to see something positive in their kids and get out of that deficiency lens into something else. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of them because I feel they are amazing.
That's great. And as we get ready to close, I just want to recognize our State Leaders Network members that are on today, and also one of our amazing staff members, Vicky, who just recently took on a new position and has left us. And I can tell you today how much I miss her because she's always been behind the scenes helping project manage. And Vicky, you are absolutely missed. I think she will be the first to tell you that some things slipped through that I forgot to do. And you had such an impact on our center, and I just want to thank you for that in public here. But just thank you to the panelists. Ava, we're giving it back to you. Nermeen, thank you. Anything you want to add, Nermeen, as we turn it back over to Ava? But it's just been really exciting.
No, I just feel like it's really exciting to kind of expand and redefine what is the future now. It has me thinking about what is the future of a career development, because I don't think in 10 years ago I would have thought of as podcasts or I would have even, I knew it exposed me to things, but I really wouldn't have thought of like, or apps or PBS kids shows. I know it was exposure to so many different things and knowledge, but seeing it as career development. So exciting to see what the next development of career development will look like.
Great. Thank you, Nermeen. Ava.
I just want to thank everyone here, our panelists and our guests, our State Leaders Network, other leaders from other organizations. Thank you so much for joining us in this very rich conversation today. This webinar will be posted on our website, and I also want to invite you to our May 14th website, where we release the next U.S. Condition for Career Readiness report. It's going to be really, really amazing. And in the meantime, thank you all for all the work that you do to build futures for our children and adults. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care now.
All righty.
Good night.